Funny how a smell can grab you by the hand and just drag you right back in time, whether you're ready or not. The other day I opened an old drawer and there it was. That dry, papery scent of chalk. Broke clean through 40 years of silence like a freight train. Land sakes alive, I had to sit down. My knees just gave out right there on the floor. Ain't that something? It wasn't the Bible I kept there, or the picture of my Clara from high school. It was an old stick of chalk wrapped in a piece of muslin. White. Smooth. Worn down to a nub. I used to carry it in my coat pocket, like some folks carry loose change or peppermints. For me it was hope pressed into powder. Now you might be wondering, Miss Ellie, what on earth does a piece of chalk have to do with anything? Well, that little thing, that nothing of a thing, took me straight back to a night in November 1985. Wind was blowing hard that evening, I remember that. The kind of cold that slides under your skin and settles in your bones. I had just buried my husband. Cancer. Quick. Quiet. Just like him. And that night, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floorboards. Didn't cry. Couldn't. I remember whispering, "That's it, Ellie Mae. It's over. You tried." But the next morning I put on my brown shoes, the ones with the sole half gone, tied my scarf, and walked down to the schoolhouse. Not for any particular reason. Just because. I hadn't been in that building since my youngest finished the 6th grade. I pushed that door open, and Lord have mercy, the smell of dust and paper and old books, it nearly broke me. But I walked up to the front office and asked the lady there, would y'all happen to have a spare chalkboard and some chalk? She looked at me like I was touched. And maybe I was. You see, I never finished school. Didn't have the shoes. Didn't have the bus fare. Didn't have the time. Back then we were just trying to get through the day. Mama worked folks' laundry, Daddy hauled freight for the depot, and I was 4th of 7. That's just how things were. We didn't have a pot to pee in, but we had hands, and hands were made to work. So I worked. Quietly. Faithfully. All the while, I kept this little fire in my chest, one nobody else could see. They all said, "Ellie Barnes, you ain't never gonna amount to nothin'." Even my own teacher. Even my aunt, bless her heart and soul. But I'll tell you what. I didn't fight em. I just kept going. Step by slow step. Like Mama used to say, we may do with what we had. But I ain't here to tell you a sob story. Lord knows there's enough of those. I'm here because after all these years, that same piece of chalk still sits in my drawer, like it's waiting for me to finish the sentence I started 4 decades ago. And lately I've been thinking, maybe it's time I told the whole story. Not the polite version I tell at Sunday socials. The real one. The one about how a poor barefoot girl from Marion, Alabama ended up in a room full of people, all standing, clapping, just for her. It ain't a tale of fame. It's not shiny. It's not loud. But it's true. And sometimes true is enough. So let me ask you something, sweetheart. Who told you that you wouldn't make it? And why do you still believe them? Well, now let me take you back a good ways. Back to Marion, Alabama, a place where the sun feels like a warm hand on your shoulder and the air tastes like cotton fields and sweet magnolia blooms. I was just a little girl then, maybe 7 or 8, barefoot most days 'cause shoes were scarce and money scarcer. We lived in a tiny wooden house, painted white but peeling like an old pear, at the end of a dusty lane where the cicadas sang all summer long. My mama worked hard, washing folks' clothes from dawn till dusk, scrubbing collars and folding sheets like they were treasures. Daddy worked down at the railroad depot, shoveling coal and keeping the trains running on time, rain or shine. 7 of us kids, 4 girls and 3 boys, all piled in that house like a heap of old quilts. We didn't have much, but we had love. Lord have mercy, we had love. I remember waking up to the smell of fried cornmeal and strong coffee, hearing the roosters crow before the sun had even thought about rising. School was a dusty little building just a mile down the road, with a creaky bell and cracked windows. I used to walk there barefoot, clutching a worn book Mama had given me, a primer with pages so thin they felt like whispers. We didn't have fancy pencils or notebooks, but I made do with scraps of newspaper folded tight to make pages and a stub of a pencil chewed on till it was too short to hold. That was just the way things were back then. I was a quiet child, but there was a fire simmering inside me, a quiet kind of stubbornness. My mama used to say, "Ellie Mae, you're no spring chicken, but you got a heart big enough to fill this whole town." I guess that's when I first learned that sometimes the quietest folks hold the loudest dreams. I dreamed of words, of books, and learning, of knowing more than just the dirt roads and the train whistles. But back then, a girl like me with calloused hands and a tired mama wasn't meant to dream too big. You'll best learn to cook, my teacher once told me, as sharp as a hawk's. And I took that to heart, but it never quite settled right in my soul. We believed in kindness though. I did. I believed it was the one thing that could change a life, even when the world told you otherwise. People always come back around, Mama would say, wiping her hands on her apron, smiling like she knew a secret. And somehow that gave me hope on the days when the world felt heavy and unfair. At night, after the kids were asleep, I'd sit by the window with a small kerosene lamp, tracing letters in the dirt on the porch with my finger, practicing the alphabet Mama taught me. I'd think about a future where I could teach, where I could help other girls like me learn to read and write, so they'd never feel so lost or small. I was quiet, but inside I was loud. I was determined. Back then the nights were long, but so was my patience. I didn't know yet how long it would take, but I knew deep down that this little girl from Marion was meant for something bigger, something better. And that's the story I carry with me, the story of where I came from, the dusty roads and warm hearts that shaped me. Because no matter what anyone said, no matter how many times the world tried to write me off, I never stopped believing in the power of kindness, and that one day, the people who doubted me would have to stand up and applaud. Well, now I reckon life's got a way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it. You think you're just walking your usual dusty road, minding your own business, and then, land sakes alive, you meet someone or something that changes the whole darn course of your story. That's exactly what happened to me when I met James. James was a tall, quiet man with eyes that held a kind of gentle fire, the kind that don't blaze loud but sure burn steady. He worked down at the train depot just like my daddy, but there was something different about him. Maybe it was the way he tipped his hat politely when he saw me, or the soft way he spoke when we crossed paths on those hot summer evenings. He wasn't much for talk, but you could tell he had a heart of gold, bless his soul. I remember the very first time I saw him, standing by the old water tower, waiting for the freight train to roll in. I was just a girl then, barely 16, my hands still stained from washing Mama's laundry and my feet aching from walking miles to school. My heart beat faster than a hummingbird's wings, and Lord knows I didn't understand why. I thought, well, Ellie Mae, you're just imagining things. But no, that feeling stuck like the Georgia heat in July. Mama always said, you young folks wouldn't understand the stirrings of the heart. And she was right. I didn't know what it meant back then to care for someone so deeply, to want to be seen beyond the dirt on your hands or the holes in your shoes. But James saw me. Not just the girl with no shoes or the one who couldn't afford fancy dresses. He saw the quiet fire, the stubborn hope tucked inside my soul. We started talking, little by little. Not much, mind you, 'cause James wasn't one for words. But he'd bring me a slice of pie from the local diner or help carry the heavy water buckets when the well ran dry. Those small things meant everything to me. And I knew deep down that something had shifted. The world felt a little less heavy, a little more possible. But life, well, life had its own plans. Not everyone saw James the way I did. Some folks in town whispered behind their hands, saying a man like him wasn't meant for a girl like me. She's no spring chicken, they'd say when I wasn't around. Others told me I was dreaming too big, that love wasn't for the likes of us. But I'll tell you what, I didn't listen. Because for the first time I felt like I mattered. That summer, James gave me a little notebook, one he'd found at the train station. Inside he'd written words, just a few simple sentences, but to me they were the whole world. Hope, he wrote, is what keeps the soul alive. I tucked that notebook close to my heart and kept it safe, even when times got tough. You see, that moment meeting James, it was more than just young love. It was a spark. A sign that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than the dirt roads and hard days. It was a push that set me on the path I'd walk for the next 40 years. A path where I'd learn to fight softly but fiercely for the things that mattered. And I'll never forget how my heart fluttered that first time I realized I was worth fighting for. That even in a world that tried to write me off, someone saw me, truly saw me. That's the kind of feeling that sticks with you, long after the train has left the station and the dust has settled. So I asked you now, have you ever met someone who changed the way you saw yourself? The kind of person who made you believe that maybe, just maybe, you're worth more than you ever thought. Now listen here, sugar, life ain't no straight road. You think you're headed one way and then, bam, the world throws a curveball at you so fast you barely have time to catch your breath. That's just what happened to me in '85, the year James passed. Cancer took him quick, quiet as a whisper. One day he was sittin' beside me, humming soft gospel tunes, and the next, he was gone. Land sakes alive, that hurt worse than anything I'd ever known. I remember that night like it was yesterday, sitting alone on the edge of our bed, the room so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. I thought, Ellie Mae, maybe this is the end of the road. Maybe all the fights left this old body. The kind of fear that wraps round your chest like a thick fog. I was scared. Scared of being alone, scared of what folks would say, scared of losing the one thing that gave my life meaning. And honey, let me tell you, it wasn't just grief that weighed on me. It was shame too. Shame that I hadn't finished what I started. Shame that I was just a poor black woman from Marion with a head full of dreams but no fancy degrees. I wondered if I was fooling myself all along. Maybe I was never meant for more than washing clothes and raising children, I whispered to the empty room. The world outside didn't make it any easier. Some folks in town shook their heads, muttering things like, she's just a widow now. What good can she do? Even family wasn't always kind. My own sister once said, Ellie, you're dreaming too big. You best stick to what you know. But I wasn't about to give up, not yet. Not on myself. That internal battle was a heavy one. There were days I wanted to crawl back under the covers and hide from it all. But then there were moments, quiet and small, when I'd catch a glimpse of that stubborn fire inside me, still burning, still strong. It was like a whisper in my ear saying, keep going, girl. You're meant for this. I started sneaking out at night, after the kids were asleep, writing letters, practicing lessons by the light of an old kerosene lamp. I borrowed a few books from the library and taught myself the words I never got the chance to learn in school. The chalkboard in my mind was filled with hopes, not doubts. Still, fear lingered. What if I failed? What if no one showed up to my little night classes? What if all those years of silence meant I wasn't good enough? I carried those questions like stones in my pocket, but I didn't let them weigh me down entirely. I had one ally, Clara, my childhood friend and neighbor. Clara believed in me when no one else would. She'd bring me a cup of tea and sit quietly while I vented all my fears. Ellie Mae, she'd say, you've got a light no one can dim. Don't let him tell you different. Her words were balm for my weary soul. So I stood at a crossroads, torn between giving up and pushing forward. The world was telling me no, but my heart was shouting yes. And in that quiet battle, I found a strange kind of strength, the kind that comes only when you've been broken down and picked up again, time and time again. That's when I knew this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And if I was going to change the story, I'd have to do it myself. Land sakes alive, I remember that day clear as a bell, the kind of day that leaves a mark on your soul, the kind you carry with you forever. It was late autumn, 1985, the kind of crisp day where the air feels sharp and every breath you take burns just a little. I was standing in that little schoolhouse, the one where I'd begged for a chalkboard and some chalk just days before. I'd been teaching my first night class to a handful of women like Maria, who couldn't read or write, but had the brightest spirit you ever did see. I was tired, but my heart was full. And then it happened. The phone rang. I saw Clara's face on the caller ID. My heart jumped in my chest. She never called unless it was serious. When I picked up, I heard the words I never thought I would. James was gone. Not just gone like before, but for good this time. There'd been an accident, something sudden, something cruel. The kind of news that makes the world freeze and time stand still. I swear to you, for a moment, the clock in that room stopped ticking. The chalk dropped from my fingers, landing with a soft thud on the wooden floor. My knees buckled, and I sank into the nearest chair, breath hitching like I'd swallowed a whole storm. I was drowning in a sea of disbelief and heartbreak. How could this be? I thought I'd said goodbye once. I thought I'd been strong enough to face it. But this was different. This was final. The man who'd given me hope, who'd seen the fire in my eyes when no one else did, was gone. And with him, a part of me felt like it had been ripped away. But you know, sugar, in that silence, between the sobs and the shock, I felt something else. A fierce, stubborn flame flickering back to life inside. A whisper that said, this ain't the end, Ellie Mae. Not by a long shot. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for the women sitting in my classroom, for the girls who'd never had the chance I'd been denied, for every soul who'd been told they weren't enough. I looked around that room at the worn desks, the cracked windows, at Maria's shining eyes, and I knew something had to change. I wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. I was a teacher, a leader, a light in the darkness. That day changed me. It broke me down and built me back up stronger than I'd ever been. It was the moment I stopped waiting for permission to live my dreams and started claiming them with every ounce of breath in my body. And I want you to feel that, dear heart. The weight of loss, the sting of sorrow, but also the power of rising. Because sometimes the hardest moments are the ones that teach us who we really are. So tell me, what was your moment when time stood still? When everything you knew shattered and you had to find a new way forward? Well, sugar, after a storm passes, sometimes all that's left is the quiet. That heavy, aching kind of quiet that settles deep inside your bones and wraps around your heart like a cold shadow. After James was gone for good, I found myself living in that quiet for a long time, days stretching out like empty roads with no signs or destinations. It felt like the whole world had turned gray, like the colors had drained out of my life and left only shadows behind. I kept going through the motions, making breakfast, tidying the house, tending to the children, but inside I was hollow. The fire that once burned bright was flickering low, struggling to stay alive. Lord have mercy, I thought maybe I'd lost that stubborn spark for good. It was like a piece of me had been torn away, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever be whole again. The nights were the hardest. When the house grew still and the children were tucked away safe in their beds, I'd sit alone by the window and stare out at the dark. Sometimes I'd talk to the stars, asking them why, asking if there was any meaning left to hold on to. I wanted to believe in something, anything that would help me make sense of the pain. My faith wavered. Not that I lost it completely, but I struggled to see the light through the thick fog of grief. I wondered if God was listening, or if he just turned his back on a tired woman from a small town. I wrestled with feelings I'd never expected: anger, sadness, loneliness, and I didn't know how to carry them all without breaking. I wasn't the same Ellie anymore. That girl with bright eyes and quiet stubbornness had changed. She was softer around the edges, maybe, but also heavier. Life had carved lines into my heart that no one else could see. And though my lips smiled when folks came around, inside I was still searching for something to hold on to, something to pull me out of the shadows. But in that quiet, in the spaces between the heartbreak and the hope, I began to find little moments of grace. A neighbor bringing over sweet tea, a child's laughter echoing through the hallways, the feel of the sun warming my face in the early morning. Those small things reminded me that even in the darkest times, life keeps moving forward. And slowly, so slowly, that flicker of fire deep inside me began to grow again. It was quieter now, sure, but it was there. The stubborn spark that Mama always talked about, the one that never fully goes out. So if you're sitting in your own quiet place right now, feeling lost or broken, just remember this: it's okay to be quiet. It's okay to feel the weight of the world pressing down on your shoulders. But don't let that quiet swallow you whole. Because sometimes the calm after the storm is where the real healing begins. And I promise you, honey, the story isn't over yet. Well, sugar, after you've been through a storm that shakes your whole world, sometimes it's the tiniest things that bring you back. I'll never forget the day I found that little spark again. Didn't come with a bang or a trumpet, no sir. It was quiet, almost like a whisper. I was sitting on my porch one slow afternoon, just watching the world go by, when Maria, one of the young women I'd been teaching, came by with a basket of fresh-picked tomatoes. She smiled that bright smile of hers and said, "Miss Ellie, I wanted to thank you. You're the reason I'm a nurse today." Land sakes alive, that hit me harder than a freight train. To hear that from someone whose life I touched, well, honey, it made my heart swell in ways I thought were long gone. I sat there, holding those tomatoes, and I felt something stir deep inside me. A warmth, a flicker of hope that maybe I still had something to give. Maybe I still mattered. That little moment was all it took. It wasn't about grand gestures or big plans, it was about the quiet knowing that what I'd done mattered. That the nights spent writing lessons by the kerosene lamp, the early mornings and the tired feet, they weren't wasted. I started thinking about the schoolhouse again. About the women who came with tired eyes but hopeful hearts. I remembered that old chalkboard, the one with hope written across it, and a resolve settled in me like morning dew on the grass. It was time to do more, to reach further, to not let that spark die out again. So I took a small step. I asked the principal if I could borrow the schoolhouse for night classes again. He looked at me a bit funny at first, an older woman with no fancy degrees asking to teach, but then he smiled and said, "Ellie, we've been needing someone like you." That gave me courage, more than I can say. With Clara's help, we spread the word. Women came, some shy, some bold, all hungry to learn. They brought their babies, their stories, their struggles. And every night we filled that room with laughter, with questions, with the scratching of chalk on blackboards. It wasn't easy. There were days I'd come home aching and places I forgot I had, nights when doubts crept in like unwelcome guests. But then I'd remember Maria's smile, or the way my youngest boy proudly walked across his college stage, and I'd find my strength again. You see, honey, life doesn't hand you second chances on a silver platter. You gotta reach out and take them. You gotta keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when the road's rough and the night's dark. And sometimes, just sometimes, you find that the light you thought was gone was never really out. It was just waiting for you to come back. So if you're sitting there wondering if it's too late to try again, let me tell you this, it ain't. It's never too late. That little flicker inside you, that stubborn spark, is what's gonna lead you through. And honey, don't ever forget, you're worth every bit of hope that comes your way. Well now, sugar, there comes a time in every life when you have to make a choice, a real hard-down decision that shakes you to your core. For me, that moment came quietly, not with a shout but with a whisper. It was late one evening, the kind of night where the world feels heavy and still, and you're left alone with all those ghosts and memories that been lurking in the shadows. I was sitting in my kitchen, the soft hum of the old ceiling fan mixing with the crickets outside, when I looked down at that old leather bag I'd kept all these years. The one with my first books, the Bible, the primer, that ragged notebook I'd scribbled lessons in. I ran my fingers over it, feeling every worn spot and every crease like they were part of me. And Lord have mercy, I realized then that I'd been carrying that bag not just as a memory but as a weight. Like I was holding onto all those years of pain, loss, and doubt, thinking maybe they define me. But honey, I'm here to tell you they don't. They never did. I made a choice that night. A choice to let go. To stop carrying the hurt and the what-ifs like a burden I had to bear forever. I chose to live, really live, without the shackles of regret or bitterness. I'm done, I whispered to the quiet room. Done letting the past tell me who I am. So I took that bag outside. The moon was high, casting silver light over the porch. I set it down on the steps and watched the stars blink back at me. And then with a deep breath I set it down. Right there. Not to forget, not to bury, but to release. To say thank you for the lessons, but no more chains. That simple act, it felt like I'd stepped into a new skin, lighter, freer, ready for whatever came next. I felt tears run down my cheeks, but they weren't the sad kind. They were the kind that wash your soul clean. I'd spent so long trying to prove to the world I was worth more, to my teachers, to my family, to the folks who said I'd never amount to anything. But that night, I realized I didn't have to prove a thing. I was already enough, just as I was. And with that, everything changed. I woke up the next day with a new kind of fire, not the stubborn fight of before, but a calm, steady flame of peace and purpose. I looked at my students and saw not just their hopes, but my own reflection. I smiled more freely. I forgave more easily. I lived more fully. So my dear, if there's something you're holding onto that's weighing you down, I want you to hear me now. You don't have to carry that burden any longer. You can set it down. You can choose to live again. Without shame. Without regret. Just forward. Because that's what I did. And that's what made all the difference. Well, darling, after all these years walking this winding road, I've come to see things a little clearer. It ain't always the big moments that teach us the most, it's the quiet ones in between, the ones filled with waiting, wondering, and sometimes a little bit of hurt. When I look back on that barefoot girl from Marion, and then at the woman standing in front of all those clapping hands, I see a journey shaped by more than just hard work or stubbornness. I see a story about faith, about patience, and about knowing when to hold on tight and when to let go. You see, I used to think success was about proving folks wrong, showing them I was more than what they said I could be. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops, look at me now. But over time, I learned that real strength don't come from loud victories. It comes from the quiet courage to keep going when no one's watching, from the gentle wisdom to be kind to yourself even when the world isn't. I realized that the hardest battles I fought weren't just out there in the world, they were inside me. The doubt, the fear, the feeling that maybe I wasn't enough. And that, my dear, is a weight a lot of us carry. But here's what time has taught me: you're stronger than you know. You have a fire inside that no one else can put out. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's easy. Life has a way of knocking you down, testing your soul, and making you question everything. But those moments, painful as they are what shape the heart of who you become. They teach you what matters and what don't. They show you the value of kindness, the power of hope, and the beauty of second chances. And here's something else I want you to hold on to. Sometimes, waiting isn't about passivity. Sometimes it's about preparing. About building strength in the shadows before you step into the light. So if you're sitting there feeling stuck or overlooked or unsure if your time will ever come, maybe it's not about how fast you run, but about holding onto that hope, like I held onto my chalk and my dreams all those years. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop waiting for permission from the world, from others, or even from yourself. Maybe it's time to start claiming your story, your worth, your place. Because the truth is, the only person who can decide what you're capable of is you. So if you ask me what I'd want you to remember from my story, it'd be this: don't let the noise of doubt drown out the whisper of hope inside your heart. Nurture that spark and let it grow into the light that guides you home. Because honey, life's too short to live small. And you're made for big things. Well now honey, here we are at the end of this little journey I've been sharing with you. I hope you've been sitting comfortable, maybe with a cup of tea nearby, 'cause stories like this deserve a slow listen. You know, sometimes I wonder what it means to really live, to hold on to the past without letting it chain you, to carry your memories like precious treasures but not like heavy stones. This story I told you today about a barefoot girl from Marion, Alabama, who was told she'd never be nothing, well, it ain't just the tale about the past. No sir. It's about today and tomorrow and the days yet to come. It's about the fight in all of us who've been told we're less than enough, and how sometimes the greatest victory is just standing tall and saying, I'm here. I'm still here. I've walked through hard times you wouldn't believe. I've lost folks I loved more than words can say. But I never lost sight of the hope tucked deep inside. And if there's one thing I want you to carry with you, it's that hope. Because it's the thing that keeps us moving when the road's rough and the night's long. Now, let me ask you something personal. And don't be shy, I won't know if you answer or not. But ask yourself this. Do you believe that true love really does come back around? Sometimes late at night, I swear I can feel James' presence nearby. Like a soft breeze on my cheek, or the faint scent of his old cologne. And I wonder if maybe, just maybe, he's watching over me still. Maybe love isn't just in the grand gestures or loud declarations, but in the quiet moments, the memories that don't fade, the hearts that never truly part. That's why this story isn't just mine. It's yours too. It's for anyone who's been knocked down but keeps getting up. For those who carry wounds hidden from the world but hold on tight to their dreams. For every soul searching for a light in the darkness. And as you walk your own path, remember this: it's okay to be quiet sometimes. It's okay to carry your stories gently, to let your heart heal at its own pace. But don't forget to hold on to hope, to let it guide you through. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share a piece of my heart with you. May you find your own chalk to carry, your own fire to kindle, and the courage to stand tall, just like I did. Because, my dear, the world needs your light. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think James remembers. I really do.